The first ever international chess tournament was held in London in the year 1851. It was organized by Howard Staunton, the greatest British player at that time. He invited players from 16 countries. Many of them, of course, could not make it, but it was considered to be the best event of those times. The winner of the event was surprisingly Adolf Andersson, a young player from Germany. He was from the town of Breslau, which is currently Wrocław in Poland. He is remembered for his attacking and romantic style of chess and the combinations which he made over the board. How did Adolf Andersson find chess combinations? The first example is taken from his game against Staunton, who was the organizer from the 1851 event. And looking at the position, first we have to find out the weakness in Black's camp. Here, for example, it's not difficult to see Black's king is weak and White's rooks are lined up against the king. But sometimes it's easy to overlook that there is another obvious weakness, that is the rook on d4, which is attacked by White queen and defended by Black's queen. If we could get rid of the defender, it's very easy to find a win. And that is exactly what Andersson does. He plays the move rook h4, attacking the queen, and this type of combinations where you attack a piece and when the piece moves you capture another piece which is behind that piece is called skewer in chess. After knight h4, rook h4, White sacrificed an exchange, but in the very next move he won the rook. In the same year, 1851, Adolf Andersson played a similar combination. This time in Berlin, his opponent was Mayet. Andersson was black, and it is black to play and win from this position. Well, it's not difficult to find out that the weakest point in White's camp is the king on g1. White would love to take his queen to h2 or h1 square, checkmating Black. But that is not possible immediately because the square h4 is defended by queen on e4. It is also not difficult to point out that Black's pieces, especially the rook, the pawn, bishop and queen, are the attacking pieces. So Black found a simple way to coordinate these four pieces and find out a checkmate. He played the move bishop f2 check. The king doesn't have any square, so rook f2 is the only move. And now the queen finds an alternate way to enter into Black's position, that is queen d1 check. The rook goes back, the only move, and now a simple diversionary tactics, that is rook h1 check, removing the king from defense of the rook, and after king h1, Black took queen f1 checkmate. Finally, we shall see a combination from one of the most well-known game in history of chess. The game is also called the Immortal Game. It was played by Andersson against Kieseritzky in London, 1851. White is one rook and one bishop down in this position. So White cannot play quietly. He has to find out a checkmate, otherwise he will lose in the endgame. Looking at the position, we can find out that the knights and the queens are the attacking pieces for White, and the weakness in Black's position is the king. Also, all Black's pieces are at the edge of the board. You can see almost all of them are on the edge of the board. So it is white to play. How did Adolf Andersson find combination from here? The knight on d5 is aiming c7, e7 and f6 squares, whereas the knight on f5 aims at g7 and e7 as well as d6 squares. White played the move e5, a very beautiful move but not difficult to find if you spotted that the queen on b2 was actually defending g7. So the move e5 blocks the diagonal of the queen. So we can say it's a blockading combination. But the move is beautiful because it, apart from blocking the queen's diagonal, it also opens this diagonal as well as sacrifices another rook. This rook was hanging. Instead of saving that rook, white had just played e5. Black captured queen a1, and now white has an option. He can either play on e2 or g2. Where does white play his king to? Well, it's not difficult to spot once again that the king on g2 would be more vulnerable to attacks, to checks on g1 square or even bishop b7 attacking along this diagonal. So the king on g2 would be more vulnerable. So white opted for king to e2. There is no way black can check the king in two moves. Well, one of the variations is after king g2, black could simply go back, play bishop b7, and when white attacks, knight c7 check, king d8, queen b7, he takes the bishop. Black could play bishop b6, threatening queen g1 check. And since there is no immediate checkmate, black can afford to actually give back some of the pieces and finally deliver a perpetual check on white. So white opted for king e2, and now white's threat is knight g7 check. When black's king moves to d8, white would play bishop c7, and you can see carefully the position is a checkmate. So white is threatening mate in 2. Black has to defend. Black played the move knight a6, controlling the c7 square and preventing checkmate. Of course, black had other defenses, and most of the moves here would secure an escape square for the king. The other moves were bishop to b7, well, securing the c8 square for the king to escape. And let us not forget that white has sacrificed most of his pieces. He has to find checkmate by any means. Against bishop b7, the simple mating idea was knight g7 check. After king d8, white would play queen f7, threatening checkmate on f8 or even e8. Now the only way once again was knight h6 so that the rook could defend e8, and now the move knight e6 check, a brilliant move because if the king goes to c8, white can checkmate by knight e7. The two knights combine very well, and if black takes on e6, white could continue queen e7 check, king c8 and queen c7 checkmate. Well, this variation demonstrates that even a few pieces can actually defeat a whole army of black if they are coordinated very well. The other option was the move f6, making an escape square for the king via f7 square. But once again, white can play knight check, and after king f7, he could capture the f6, and once again an array of white's pieces can checkmate black very easily. For instance, king g7, white can play knight e8 check, and after king h6, queen f4 checkmate. And the third defense, which was considered to be best, in fact, former world champion Max Awe even said that black can save the game by playing after this, former world champion Max Awe from the Netherlands even said black can save the game by playing bishop a6, the idea being the king not only has d8 and c8 but also b7 square to escape. But of course, the variations, lots of moves were analyzed, and finally the move starting with knight c7 check was found to be winning for white. After king d8, knight a6, well, the combination of bishop, knight and this queen are sufficient to find a win for white. I would not cover the full variations because they would take us to. In the game, Kieseritsky opted for knight a6, and white found a very beautiful, a simple combination to checkmate black in 3 moves. White played knight g7 check, king d8. It's not difficult to find that black king is stuck in the center of the board. It doesn't have any square to escape. The c8, c7, e7 and even e8 squares are all covered by his own pieces or black's pieces. White simply needs one check to deliver checkmate. So he played the move queen f6, diverting this knight from e7, and after knight f6 check, he played bishop e7 checkmate. So the moves were very beautiful. They were of course immortal moves. Only few pieces were able to defeat the whole army. But behind every move there was a very simple logic. I hope you liked my video today, and I hope this video will enable you to find out the logic behind chess combinations. That's all for today. Goodbye.